Welcome back everyone to the weekly mailbox, your chance to ask me questions about anything you would like, Formula 1, Formula E, motorsports, anything in general. I hope you've all recovered after that insane Austrian Grand Prix, the first round finally of the 2020 season. But today's mailbox, we're going to change it up slightly. This is only going to be for today, so don't get too carried away. Usually, if you're new around here, what we do with the mailbox is it's your chance to ask me 5 questions a week, and I pick out my favourite 5 or the most liked 5 that are in the comments, try and do a bit of a mix, and usually, primarily, they're all Formula 1 questions. But this week, we had easily over 200 questions, and picking out 5 was always going to be impossible, and loads of you have so many questions after the first weekend of racing. And I did think as well, a lot of these questions that were brilliant, once we've had another week of racing, they're kind of going to be obsolete questions because we'll know a little bit more. So today we're going to answer as many questions as possible. We're not just sticking with 5. I have liked my favourites from the YouTube community post, and I'm just going to go through them as quickly as I can, giving my best answers that I can. We could have upwards of about 30 questions we're answering today, so a hell of a lot of you are going to be featured in today's episode. But as always, if you want to keep up to date with all of Formula 1 2020 news, reviews, all that good stuff, and if you've got a question for next week's episode, Instagram, Twitter, comment section down below. Right. This is going to be a long one. Strap yourselves in. Shall we start off with question number 1, which comes from Jens van Eek. Do you think McLaren is able to compete with the top teams over a whole season? I think that's a little bit of a push. I think McLaren looked brilliant this weekend, and certainly I think they're in that fight for the 3rd best car. Certainly I think Racing Point just have the edge, but their reliability wasn't great this weekend. And also I think the driver pairing at McLaren is stronger than that of Racing Point. Nothing against Perez or Stroll, but I think Sainz and Norris just have that nice blend of feistiness and youthfulness. And I think we saw this weekend, Perez got caught napping with Lando Norris, that awesome little overtake. A little bit of contact with Sergio Perez, but overall, I think McLaren, long term, have a better package. Do I think they're going to be able to compete with the top teams over a whole season? I think that's a bit of a push. I think Mercedes certainly are in a league of their own, and Red Bull certainly would have been in front of McLaren if not for their reliability issues. But if McLaren, like last weekend, if they can just keep themselves in the race, put themselves in the right position, certainly think they'll be near the front for the rest of the season. And of course, don't forget Ferrari. Plenty of questions about those today. Clear Natters asks, if Verstappen has more reliability issues next weekend, does that put him out of the running for the championship? I think it does. And there's 2 ways of looking at this. If you think about this season as it's going to be 8 races and then we'll just take what we can get after that, yeah, even 1 retirement you'd probably say is out of the running. 2 retirements, almost definitely, that's a quarter of the races if you're sticking with those 8 races. However, even if we end up with a 15 to 18 race calendar that Formula 1 are going for, 2 non-finishes is quite a lot, especially when you're considering, like in your question, a championship fight. You're not going to see Hamilton and Bottas retire from 2 races. That's very, very unlikely. Hamilton finished every single race last season in the points. So 2 non-finishes when it's more likely than not Mercedes are going to be the quickest anyway at most weekends. Yeah, I think if Red Bull have more reliability issues next weekend, they can see this championship and wave it goodbye, sadly. Question number 3 comes from Wajabo. I said that one wrong. Are you ready for the Renault announcement this week? Fernando Alonso is back. Right. Is it going to happen? Is it not? Supposedly we're finding out tomorrow or Thursday who's going to be in that Renault seat. I'm not convinced we will. When you look at Formula 2 this weekend, both Guan Yu Zhou and Christian Lundgaard had brilliant weekends. And Renault, what's the point in having a driver academy if you've got really good drivers, but you aren't going to use them. That seems a little bit strange. And it's one of those things where I'm always wondering why they haven't ever looked into getting a B team in Formula 1. A lot of the rumours say Alonso. A lot of the rumours are saying at the moment that all the veteran mechanics that have worked at the team know whoever's coming to the team or returning to the team, it looks like. So names on that list are going to include Alonso, Hulkenberg, Magnussen, maybe, Jolyon Palmer, Grosjean as well, actually. A lot of people actually in the questions this week saying Grosjean returning to Renault. I don't see that personally. I think that'd be a very strange decision. And also, Vettel is still being linked with the seat. I'm so undecided on who should go to Renault. I was very convinced it should be Pierre Gasly, but with this statement that it's going to be someone returning, Alonso probably is the best bet, but a story certainly to keep your eye on this week. TGS F1 Ollie asks, and if you haven't ever checked out TGS F1, I've put him in my little kind of like recommended channel section over on my homepage on YouTube. Done a video with him, 10 in 10, previewing the season. I think I was a little bit wrong with my predictions for Haas this year, but lovely, lovely bloke, a huge McLaren fan, and I'm sure he had a brilliant weekend. And he asks, was this the best opening race in the last 10 years? It's got to be a contender. And off the top of my head, by a country mile, it's the best opening race we've had in the last 10 years. 2010, you can't really include that, can you? But 2010, it was pretty spicy. Jensen, oh no, it was Alonso that won that one, wasn't it? It was in Bahrain. It was an okay Grand Prix. 2011, no clue what happened in that one. 2012, yeah, it was okay at the start of that streak of the 7 different race winners. 2013, I loved Kimi Raikkonen winning for Lotus. I was a huge Lotus fanboy and Kimi Raikkonen fanboy back in the day. So that was a personal favourite of mine. But certainly recently, I mean, nothing against Melbourne, but just the nature of the circuit, it isn't necessarily the best for an opening weekend. I still really enjoy the venue and would love to, well, I'd hate to see it leave the calendar. But this race this weekend, contender for the best race over the last 10 years, not necessarily the best opening race. It was awesome. And yes, I think there's probably a slight little bias that we've gone so long without F1. But still, that was great. Well, come on. We had a bit of everything. The only thing that was missing, really, is a real fight for the lead. Although we did have that at stages and a bit of rain. But that's literally it. It was so, so good. Best race for a very long time. Better than Brazil, in my opinion. Probably Germany last year was better, but still awesome. Still absolutely loved it. Glenn Robertson, is Giovinazzi too underrated and overlooked for his ability and potential? In the race, he made up a lot of positions, and he lost some again, but then made them up again and even passed Vettel to score some points. He had a really good race, actually. Giovinazzi. It wasn't anything spectacular, and of course he was helped out massively by plenty of the front runners dropping out of the Grand Prix, but like you mentioned, did get a move on Vettel late on in the race, though Seb was having his own issues, that's for sure, this weekend. Was comfortably better than Raikkonen in the practice and qualifying. That's a big positive considering his pace relative to Raikkonen last year and how good Raikkonen did at this exact venue last year. And in the race, yeah, he kept his nose clean, made a couple of good overtakes, was pretty much there or thereabouts with the likes of Raikkonen, Magnussen, the 2 AlphaTauris, Ocon in that nice little fight in that bottom of the midfield. Overlooked? Maybe. I think his performance this weekend has gone under the radar, but then when you look at the likes of Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, Perez, Bottas, I certainly think there's other drivers that did a better job this weekend. But if this is going to be Raikkonen's last year, and I think, well, there's a question a little bit later on about who could maybe move up to Alfa Romeo next year, I think Giovinazzi would be a solid number 1, actually, and for another young gun to learn off and be compared to. And certainly, if it doesn't work out with Sainz or whatever, Giovinazzi maybe should be thrown into contention. But I think he's one of those ones that is a little bit overlooked in the fandom. Ashutosh Mahapatra. If Bottas wins the championship this season, what happens to George Russell? That's a great question. One I don't really have an answer for because they will be stuck. They will be piggy in the middle. They've got 3 drivers that will be brilliant for their team. But I think the proper answer here is that Russell will just stay at Williams. He's got a 3-year contract anyway, and I think that's quite often forgotten. He is one of the very few drivers that is actually under contract for next year. It's Russell, Perez, Leclerc and Verstappen. Oh, and also we got Ricciardo and Sainz, and that's it. That is literally it of contracted drivers. Williams won't want to get rid of him. Latifi did a strong job this weekend, but they still need Russell to have those brilliant performances. So they'll do everything in their power to keep him. And if Bottas wins the championship, maybe he'll do a Rosberg. I don't think he will. And I don't see Hamilton going anywhere if Bottas wins it. So I think Russell will stay at Williams for one more season. Abhinav Dilip, with concerns Mercedes with their gearbox and Andrew Shovlin himself saying the cars are fast but fragile, do you see another midfield taking the podium, especially if Merc have more gearbox and power unit issues this weekend? I'll tell you what, all through that race, it seemed pretty nailed on. We'd have some kind of, I want to say bizarre podium. Unexpected podium. That's a better way of putting it. Because Albon looked like he may be able to finally get that first podium under his belt. And then when him and Hamilton had that contact, we had so many midfield cars lining up to jump on that podium. And ultimately, we did have 2 midfield cars on the podium. Depends how you want to view Ferrari this year. But Leclerc, that Ferrari was rubbish this weekend. So that drive will go on. That's so underrated. Really, really special what Leclerc did this weekend. And Norris as well. Really strong race, getting onto the podium. And to be honest with you, not just Mercedes and their issues, because that is concerning. They won't be able to get new gearboxes and power units for next weekend unless they want to take big penalties. It's concerning that they're already having issues going into this next weekend. They know a little bit why it's happening, and staying off the curbs probably will be a priority this weekend, but that's going to slow them down. And yeah, if they do have some kind of issues, certainly. I think we've got the top 2 teams, Mercedes and Red Bull, and then it's a real midfield scrap, and anyone from your Norrises, your Sainz, your Vettels, all the way down to your Ricciardos and Ocons could be on that podium. Kiru J, will Hamilton and Albon crash into each other again this season? Hey, it's possible. Yeah. It's good for Albon that he's in that position, in the sense that when he first joined Red Bull, he was a little bit far behind those top 5 cars. But now, 2 times in the last 3 races, he's been in a direct fight with Lewis Hamilton. Yes, safety cars have helped out a little bit, but Gasly was never in that situation. Will they crash into each other again this season? I don't think so. I think Albon, knowing now 2 podiums have gone down the drain after contact with Hamilton, I think he will err on the side of caution a little bit more. Not that he needs to, because both of them weren't really his fault. And Hamilton should maybe give a little bit more room. I think Hamilton, his comments after the race, he did feel a little bit guilty by the looks of it. And certainly, there was a few questions today I've not picked out, but saying, has Hamilton got more hate than he needed for that incident? Definitely. I mean, yes, it's unfortunate that it was Albon again, but it was a racing incident. But due to how dramatic the effect was on Alex Albon, and the fact that Hamilton probably could have lifted a little bit, it's certainly fair he got a 5-second penalty, but some of the comments, crikey bobbers, wasn't that bad, guys. It really wasn't. And if that was Vettel he crashed into, or Verstappen, maybe it would have been a different story. But I think both of them will maybe give a little bit more room in future. Victor Monk Knudsen. Why have nobody talked about Grosjean, who is French, going to Renault? I wanted to include this. I kind of mentioned it earlier, actually. I didn't quite mean to, but I think no one's mentioning it because it would be a strange move for Renault, especially this weekend. Ocon wasn't on the level of Ricciardo. Yes, it was his first time in over a year, almost 2 years, jumping back in an F1 car. But Ricciardo, I think, will be that number 1 this season. And I think they need another proven driver to lead that team, and also to give Ocon something to aim towards. I think if you put Grosjean in that car, and again, this is kind of coming from a Grosjean fan, I think that's maybe showing a lack of desire, not only towards your fans and your aspirations in F1, but for the higher-ups at Renault that are already questioning whether they need to be pumping so much money into F1. If you're bringing in a driver like Grosjean, rather than an Alonso, a Vettel, a Gasly, I think that says a lot about the team's aspirations over the next couple of years. And that's nothing against Grosjean. I just think he's come to the end of his time in F1 now and isn't really a kind of driver you want to be leading your team back to the front for the future. And like we said earlier, it is technically a possibility, but they've already got a French driver. And if they wanted another one, they should go for Gasly. Ewan Kirby, why did George Russell park his car where he did? This was to the detriment of his contracted team. So this is talking about when Russell retired, he parked on the inside of turn 4 and it caused a safety car, which obviously closed up the two Mercedes, and Albon had a great chance at the victory at that stage of the race. He parked his car where he did, mainly because the car broke down there. And that's a really silly answer, but the other option would be to go all the way over the gravel, and his car was on flames. So I don't think he would have been able to have enough momentum to get all the way over the gravel, and it would have been far, far more dangerous parking just off the circuit in the gravel on the outside due to the nature of that corner. Because we already saw Grosjean do a spin there, Hamilton and Albon had their contact there, so if there was a parked car there, that's the natural racing line, and that would have been very dangerous indeed for drivers pretty much flooring it on the exit of that corner. On the inside, there is regulations, and we saw it this weekend in Formula 2. You have to park your car outside the two white lines, or else you do get a penalty for the next weekend. So he pretty much did the right thing. I'm not quite sure whether there was a little orange fence where cars like to park up so that the stewards can pull it back in. No, they can't have been because there was a safety car. However, I think maybe he was potentially trying, because it's pretty much downhill from that section, maybe he was going to try and roll it. I think he did the right thing, and George isn't silly, and technically it was to the detriment of his team, but technically it was the Mercedes power unit that blew up that caused the safety car in the first place. Awesome Superior. Will Ferrari be able to improve itself this year? If not, should we expect some serious changes in team management? Possibly. We saw changes with Aruba Bene after a couple of years where they were so close to the title, and realistically driver mistakes cost them a real shot at it. Yes, the car and probably whole team wasn't quite on the level of Mercedes, but still, Ferrari were looking good those years and could have been much closer if Seb didn't make a couple of mistakes. But this is a huge backward step from the team. And I think, yeah, we could see some serious changes. It's all going to depend on the upgrade package in Hungary. Because if that works, it proves that Binotto has the ability to turn things around, put that technical ability to good use. But if it doesn't work, slipping into that midfield is something Ferrari never want to be doing. 2013 and 14 weren't great, but this is a whole new level of bad. They've got away with a podium this weekend, and they've got a very special driver in Leclerc. But it might be time for changes. And again, any other team, you'd probably give them a couple of years, but Ferrari are so harsh with management, and having an average year last year and then having a dreadful year this year, they will want to make changes. Wergabo, is Sainz the biggest loser of the race? Was clearly faster than Leclerc, who ended second. I don't think biggest loser. I think that's a little bit harsh. Was involved with that contact with Sebastian Vettel when he was fighting Leclerc, and that kind of put to bed Sainz's opportunities to get that switch back on Leclerc, actually, which he was probably a little bit frustrated about considering where Leclerc went on to be. But I thought Sainz had a really good race. Started 8th place, worked his way in front of both Racing Points early doors, even before Stroll had his issues. Got past Checo Perez with a few laps to go, had that great fight with Leclerc, brilliant couple of fights with Lando Norris as well. So, yeah, he'll be disappointed he wasn't on the podium, but the race itself was awesome. Zorro Bell, which team is going to come out on top in the Ferrari, McLaren, Racing Point, Renault fight? Who knows, Zorro Bell? Who has a clue? At the moment, McLaren are quite comfortably the second in the championship, aren't they? Goodness me. And then Racing Point are just in behind. Ferrari, then Racing Point, isn't it? At the moment, I think you'd say McLaren. Reliability looked good this weekend. One of the only teams, actually, that got both cars to the checkered flag. Drivers look raring to go. Norris has got a podium and that bit of form under his belt. Sainz had a brilliant race. Racing Point, though, did look quick. They weren't happy with qualifying. I think qualifying next weekend will be a little bit cleaner. And maybe both Stroll and Perez can be a little bit higher up. So maybe Racing Point. And again, Renault looked a little bit further behind, but Ricciardo felt there was more in the car. Ocon will get up to speed, and Ferrari, once again, it's all going to come down to the upgrade package. But right now, I'm fancying McLaren, but maybe that's just after the brilliant weekend they have. I'm being a little bit silly. DMCC. I feel like Alex Albon reminds me of David Coulthard a lot, especially in the way he's such a gentleman driver. Do you feel this is a valid comparison? Oh, yeah. Why not? I mean, it's not bad company to be with, DC. He didn't quite get ever on championship level, but I think he had 14 victories in Formula 1. Channel 4 always love to say that. I'm pretty sure it's 14. Had great company with teammates, Kimi Raikkonen, Mark Webber, Mika Hakkinen famously, of course. So DC certainly knew his way around an F1 car, but was often, I suppose, put in that number 2 role, but was also able to really push his teammates and get the best for the team. So if Albon can do that for Red Bull, he's in very good company. Michael Tobias, or Michelle maybe. Michael with 2 L. Anyway, can you discuss how undrivable Vettel's car was? Certainly. It didn't look good. There's that onboard lap, isn't there? I think you've mentioned from lap 9. It wasn't stable at all. It kind of looked like when you give your controller to a friend or someone who's never played an F1 game and they can't quite stick to the racing line, it's all a little bit messy. That's what it looked like. And I think that was what was worrying about Seb's weekend. Yes, there was the Spinella and the contact with Sainz, but the car just looked bad. Pace in qualifying was rubbish, but that on-board was really, really bad and really, really worrying for a team like Ferrari. Gamer Kyron, just a quick question. Do you think the third DRS zone in Austria should be removed, as overtaking seems to be way too easy? Martin Brundle pointed this out on, well, I can't remember what lap it was, but during commentary of the race. I don't think they should get rid of it, no. There's a reason it's there. And yes, it was a little easy for certain cars, but in the midfield it wasn't. In the midfield, we didn't see cars flying back past one another every single fight. We saw it, yes, with Hamilton when he was getting past front cars, but that Mercedes was 10 gajillion seconds a lap quicker anyway than the front of the pack. So, yes, if you get rid of DRS, the net effect will be if Hamilton or Bottas or whoever in a top car is in that midfield, it's going to be a little bit harder for them to get through. But the fight for the rest of the field, once those top cars have got through, it's going to be rubbish. That's why we've got DRS at the moment. I can go on quite a while about DRS because it's certainly a controversial topic in F1, but I think that's maybe a little bit too harsh on the drivers. I don't know. I'm probably in the minority there, but I think that's going to be to the detriment of the racing. Though it's artificial racing, DRS, overall I think the result will be a much more boring Grand Prix, but maybe they'll get rid of it. I don't know. Could we see a Bottas Hamilton rivalry like we saw with Hamilton and Rosberg? There was a lot of history with Hamilton and Rosberg. There really, really was. I don't think they would ever quite get to that level. They seem to get on really, really well. Hamilton's on the back foot for sure this season, but Bottas is one of the coolest characters on the grid with Kimi Raikkonen. So, no, I don't quite see it boiling over. Hans Helger, why do the cars suddenly have reliability like 50 years ago? More DNF than Germany 2019 without rain. I know. Who knows why the cars just fancy blowing up? I have no valid reason and explanation to why reliability for these cars has been so good for so many years now. There was no real regulation changes for this season, and yet they were all blowing up like I don't know what. Maybe it was the curbs. That's what Mercedes said with the big vibrations on the curbs, thanks to new curbs this year at the circuit. Maybe that was causing too much vibrations on some of these cars. I don't have a clue, but I certainly didn't mind it Gave us a great fight at the front, great fight in the midfield, so more again, please. Swamp Thing 94. Do you think that Seb's spin and otherwise poor performance was the so-called last nail in the coffin of his F1 career? Harsh. And I don't think so. A little bit rusty this weekend, that's for sure. Wasn't brilliant overall this weekend, out in Q2 of course, but the car was bad. I don't want to forget that. That car was really, really bad. I mean, we answered a question a minute ago, didn't we? About how unstable it was. It looked borderline undrivable, and actually kind of looked more undrivable than last year's Williams car. Yes, it was quicker than last year's Williams car, but at least Russell and Kubica could keep it in a straight line. This one was, whew. And yeah, maybe it was Seb. Maybe it was his driving style, because Leclerc didn't seem to have as many issues, but honestly, I don't want to judge too much about Ferrari's performance until we get this upgrade package. And it's why I'm kind of being a little bit quiet on Alfa Romeo and Haas as well, because all of those teams waiting for Hungary, waiting for those upgrade package, and all of them need it. Daz Fons, does Russell's race show how good he is before that engine died? 100%. I spoke about it in my race review. He smashed it. He did such a good job, not only in qualifying, but in the race as well. 12th place he was hovering for pretty much the entire Grand Prix. And fighting with Sebastian Vettel in that first race of the season. Not only fighting with Seb, but holding him off. And the only way Seb got past was when Russell retired. Yeah, brilliant job. Brilliant weekend. And I think we'll score points this season. Tashi, when is the F1 2020 Open Lobbies starting? Next week. Keep an eye out on Twitter for an announcement, but I'm aiming for Monday. But yeah, keep an eye out on Twitter for that one. And our final question, our audience participation question. So I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Adcast98. How many cars do you think will not finish the race this weekend? And what driver/drivers out of the 9 that didn't finish will have the best race this weekend? So the 9 that didn't finish: Verstappen, Ricciardo, Stroll, Magnussen, Grosjean, Russell, Raikkonen, Albon, Kvyat. I think that's the 9. Yeah. I think both Red Bulls will come punching their way out of the gate, so they're certainly in the mix. Ricciardo, he went a few races last year, I think it was 3 or 4, without scoring his first point of the season. So he'll be fired up to improve on last weekend. Lance Stroll is another one I think could surprise a lot of people and get a big points haul this weekend, maybe even a cheeky podium if things go his way. And George Russell, hopefully he can get through to Q2. Was right on the edge. Yeah, I'll go with George Russell for the one that's going to surprise and come out of the gates fighting next weekend. And that was your very special episode of the Weekly Mailbox. Things will go back to normal next week. Don't expect to see this for a little while, but we've tried something new. So hopefully you have enjoyed. If you are new around here, subscribe button is down below. Welcome to the team if you do choose to subscribe. Like button if you enjoyed the new testy format of the Mailbox. Dislike if you didn't, and feedback is always appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.